Truth Talks. Please, I'm excited about the Truth Talks. They are addressing true fellowship and what it means, what true fellowship and corporate worship looks like according to the Bible.
I will sing to the old rugged cross, and exchange it someday for a crown.
We are getting ready to get into some interesting times. I mean, we have already been in interesting times as we travel along with God as He works His works throughout the scriptures. And I always say that we have the scriptures in hindsight because we're going to go into a little bit of the later scriptures that were penned, but we also, for just a brief time, let's just look at the state of Israel, the people, the kings, the prophets, what's currently going on in their situations, right? So where did we last leave off with the people? David's on a run, and Jonathan's a happy tag along, right? Because Jonathan and David did what? They became friends. They made a covenant with each other, and that covenant is very important. That covenant is very important. So last time we left off, Jonathan and David, well, David had finally finished with Saul. This was what, chapter 18, right? That's where we closed it out. And then Saul said he was still more afraid of David. This is 1 Samuel chapter 18, 29. This is how we ended the last time with the state of Israel. We had a king. We had a man on a run, an innocent man, actually, a very innocent man who did no wrong throughout Israel except what he was asked to do, to go where he was told to go, even by a king that everyone else was saying it was, hey, Saul is doing this and he's taking the kingdom in this direction. David still followed Saul's order. And we're going to see this as we continue to see David being on a run, how he's handling this, how he's interacting with the situation of being pursued by somebody he loves. Now, when I went back and as I was really reading the text, things kept standing out to me. Things that people forget about Saul and David. We know it's two people that were anointed by God. One lost his anointing and one has it at the current moment. We know these things. But sometimes we forget that as we travel through the Bible, we forget some of the most simplistic things. David is Saul's son-in-law. So a lot of these things where the opportunity, when we'll see as we go forward, the opportunity spring up to take out the king, we understand why David doesn't want to do it. It's not so much just all of the loyalty of that. That's actually my father. That is why would I want to kill my father? So if you think about the mindset of David being pursued, not just by King Saul, everybody is thinking, as the story goes on, King Saul is chasing David. And in David's mind is, my father is pursuing to kill me.
He don't know why.
And he has nothing in his heart. He has not done anything wrong. He said it several times. If it was me, put me to death. He told Jonathan this when they were making their covenant. And we're going to get into a lot of that relationship, because that relationship becomes really important way later on down the line. It's some promises made to Jonathan that is kept later on by a king. All right, so let's get into it. The last thing that Saul said, the last thing we read in the last chapter 1:18, starting at 29, Saul then still was more afraid of David. And we knew why Saul was afraid of David, because he saw what David was becoming. He saw what David was doing. He saw how David acted with the people. He saw how David went out with battle. He even saw how David was in at times where things should have been bad, and Saul sending him out, he still prevailed. So the fear is a natural fear of seeing that someone that is truly blessed by God. At one point, Saul was feared like that. So not only is it a fear that he sees on an outward, he also understands it now being on the other side of that. Remember how Saul, from being a humble man to a king, to a warring king, fighting around all the people around him, and now he's seeing somebody else who possessed that same spirit. It's scary if you're looking at it from a negative perspective. Let's say somebody came in and they said, well, this person right here, he's got this, he's a success, he's a great, author, writer, and somebody coming up behind him and saying, he's all of that, but I'm all that too. But you know what they're capable of. So that fear is what's gripping Saul. The fear of knowing that it's somebody just better than him. And it's not just the fear of like, do I think? He knows what's coming. We'll see as it progresses how Saul's final step in a lot of wrong directions lead him to a true understanding of David being king. So we are 18. Hopefully we can make it to 24. I might be zooming a little tonight, not for a rush, but it's going to be a lot of things that as we pull them out of the scripture, words that are being said, they're going to be quick. If you want me to slow down, please slow me down. And might be some heavy reading as well too. So if you read ahead and I'm boring you, just do like this. Somebody once told me that if I'm moving too slow or too fast, just tell me, or I'm staying on the same subject. Hey, you beating a dead horse. I respect it. Because sometimes I like to talk about the Bible. So I might get stuck on something that I feel needs a lot of conversation. All right. Whew. What an intro. All right. So, and it says, and Saul, still more afraid of David, and Saul came to be an enemy of David all the days. And the prince of the Philistines went out fighting, and it came to be whenever they went out fighting, David acted more wisely than the other servants of Saul, then his name became very precious. So, like I said, Saul is seeing this man develop into something. Remember, what was the first thing he told David when he came up? You are a... But what did Saul tell David when he was going up against Goliath? You are a man of what? Youth. And he told him, like, these are men who are out here fighting. But we are seeing the transition, somebody who got to watch it. And instead of nurturing David, knowing that he's coming up behind him and seeing what his potential is, so Saul decided, I got to stomp this out, because if I can stomp it out, then I can keep my line. This was never even really about Saul's potential of him continue. This was literally about him keeping the line of Saul going. There were some promises made to Jonathan, but Saul didn't get it because, hey, you don't have that. You don't get to keep your kids in the kingdom. It's not a right of yours anymore. You gave that up through disobedience. Mm-hmm. Simple enough, right? So now Saul is chasing David, right? And in the process of Saul chasing David, David had made a good friend with Jonathan. All right, and David and Jonathan made, Jonathan being that friend, like, and when they say a friend, like, we've had best friends, and a lot of us have made best friends throughout life to where you say, it feel like you and I are knit together. My mom used to always say I had friends and they would come in and here come Tweedledum and Tweedledee, and sometimes they would change out. Sometimes I might be Tweedledum and they might be Tweedledee, but it was just two people that you knew that at any point in life they were going to look out for each other. They just knew it from the first meeting. Jonathan said, hey, you and I, we're knit together. So Jonathan is still, once again, we see the royalty side of it, but it's Jonathan's father. This is his father that him and David are talking about. Jonathan's like, no, if my dad wanted to kill you, he would tell me because I am his son. But David had to give him a quick reminder. Remember what that reminder was? Yeah, that one time he tried to kill him already. He tried it, but David had to give him a reminder about Jonathan. Not so much about Saul, about Jonathan. Something that David was aware of that everybody else could be aware of when they see it and think about the situation. David is saying to Jonathan, he knows you because he's your father. So everything you think he won't tell you, he knows that me and you are close. Look at how me and you, these interactions were not short. So David is letting him know, like, I'm combining the two here because this is two interactions. I'm just telling you all from Jonathan's side. We'll get into the things that David and Jonathan came up with, but I'm explaining David and Jonathan's relationship and their relationship with their father and father-in-law. And we'll get into, I promise I'm gonna go back to the scriptures, give you numbers, write them down. It's gonna be a beautiful thing. But Jonathan and David have this relationship to where it's like, this is my friend. This is my brother. I love him. And if my father wants to kill him, I'm going to do everything I can to find out it's true because I know David didn't do anything. And David is like, look, if you find me guilty, put me to death, Jonathan. You do it. Who would not better want to do it than my best friend? Because you found me wrong. So let's get into the text. And Saul and Jonathan's service, they said, wait, we're going to put David to death. And Jonathan declared to David, saying, my father Saul seeks to put you to death, and now please be on your guard. He's warning them until morning. I'm at 1 Samuel 19:2 right now. And I'm going to skip around, but I'm going to stay in the text of this, all right? And Jonathan and myself and I shall go out and stand by my father in the field. So this is he's going to inquire. He's going to get that first inquiry to say, all right, if my father, we're going to have this conversation, and I'm going to see. I'm going to see if what David is saying, if he is a righteous man and on a run for no reason, I'm going to see. I'm going to see what ails my father. So Jonathan spoke well of David and Saul's father. And he said to him, let not the sovereign sin against the servant, against David, because he has not sinned against you. He hasn't done anything. So he's pleading with his father like he has not done anything. What is your beef with David? For he took his life in his hand, and then he starts telling about David's conquest, the things that David did. Like, Jonathan is really a good friend. You know, there's some Psalms and Proverbs, and it talks about, I will have to go back and specifically pull them out, and I will. I don't have them offhand, but I just remember it specifically talks about when people speak of you in rooms that you aren't even in. You know, that's what Jonathan is doing. David isn't anywhere around. He is lifting up David's name by bringing it to Saul's remembrance that this guy, when you wanted him to go out and battle against the Philistines, now remember what we just read in the last chapter at the very end, he acted wisely. He did your bidding. Why do you seek to kill him? Now, it's funny because when we think about David being on a run, we do remember that Jesus had to constantly move around because the Pharisees seek to kill him. And it was people who would step up and ask the Pharisees the same question. Why do you seek to kill Christ? And a lot of times they had no reason. They had no real answer, except he's disturbing the norm. He's changing the way things are going. We don't want him to be. Now, Saul had insight. He had intel on what was going on. So he kind of knew why he needed to kill David. But the Pharisees, they just wanted to kill Jesus because sometimes you wonder, but we all know what the answers are, why they had to kill him. Because it had to be so. All right. And he said he took his hand, and Saul listened. He listened to the voice of Jonathan, and he told Jonathan, he said, I swear as God live, I won't kill that man. Empty promises. We're going to see that Saul makes a lot of empty promises. He makes empty promises to people because he's starting to lose that connection. He's starting to say, well, yep, as God live, I won't do that. And then he turns around and go and do it. We see that disobedience is starting to not only influence the outside of who Saul was by the things, we're starting to see Saul even lie to himself. That's a dangerous place to be. He said, as Saul listened to Jonathan, and Saul swore, as Jonathan lives. Now, I'm not saying this to give Saul a bad rap, but I'm putting in perspective of what's going on in this great family crisis. We have a father who his mind is troubling him because he's lost his kingdom. We have a son who's torn between a father and a brother. And this is the thing. When Jonathan would go out and David would go out, they probably battled side by side. So not just a brother through marriage, not just a brother through, because, the royalty, they probably have been on the battlefields together. And that builds up a certain type of connection. So Jonathan is really advocating for David. And then Jonathan calls David to them and he says this word. So Jonathan brought David to Saul, and he was in the presence before him, and then they were fighting again. And David went out with the Philistines and struck them with a great smiting, and they fled. And the evil spirit, now we see this evil spirit keeps coming. It keeps coming. Now, this time, remember when the evil spirit would come? What would happen? David would try to soothe him with the lyre.
Well, he requested him up there to soothe him.
He requested him to
he was
come up
always
to soothe.
happy when he did.
When he played the
always
instrument.
Brought his spirits up.
It lifted his spirits. So this evil spirit would get lifted up, but we're going to start to see that even that's not going to work anymore. All right, an evil spirit from Saul. An evil spirit from God came upon Saul, and he sat in his house with the spear in his hand. And David was playing this lyre. Now, this is the same thing, or the harp. He was playing this instrument, something that used to bring him solace, calm him down when the evil spirit. And Saul sought to strike the spear through David and into the wall, but he slipped away from the presence of Saul, so struck the spear in the wall, and David fled. Now, the mind of Saul is now the thing that gave him peace. He's not only it doesn't bring him solace anymore, He's running away. He is running it away. David has now physically have to leave. So Saul's actually to a point where he's breaking his own peace. He can't even keep his own peace because he wants to destroy it. I could tie that to a lot of things, but I'm gonna just leave that with Saul right now because we see how deprived this man is. He's literally falling apart. And the things that could soothe him, the people that were around him, he's starting to lose trust in them. All right. So Saul, after go for it.
Just going to Mr. Point here, I thought he made the vow that he would kill David. You know, it wasn't just his standalone promise that would keep him doing it. It was really up to the Lord whether he would even try. And so it was after the Lord had sent the evil spirit again that he did this. There's somebody that asked me about Trump and trial, this situation. I'm preaching. I said, if something come your way, you know it's hard. It might be brought it. But that evil spirit was from the Lord that came upon him. That caused him to break that vow. In other words, it really wasn't up to him. Right. You know, his heart and mental capacity at the time went well. And then the Lord moved upon him again and sent an evil spirit.
So
That's because he's reading exactly what the word says too, is what it says from the Lord. That's what the scripture said.
Right, so David was going to what he was going to in response to what the Lord had did to Saul.
Saul, yeah.
I mean, like I said, I could tie this to we see
Started to God in this situation.
Right.
we see so much of how we and I said, and that's why I kind of said like the Pharisees, right? It was never in their control to pursue Christ. They would have done it regardless if they did. So a promise made is empty because it didn't have any ability. Because who are you promising to? And we'll see the difference as you read through your text. You'll see the difference. David won't make a move without Saul. Without God. Saul says, "I'll make a move. I'll tell God I won't make a move," and then do something completely different. We've seen it. This is a pattern of disobedience. We've seen it. David was obedient, Saul was disobedient. And if you think about the persecution, and I know similarities and lining things up, just like the chastisement came from the father, it's still coming from the father because David looks at Saul from the father. So this persecution, David doesn't see it how we see it. He sees it as, Father, why have you forsaken me? What have I done to you? Now, people will say, no, David would never say that. That was Jesus. Well, if you go to Psalms 22, when David was being chased, and that was kind of like my segue here. So David's on the run. We haven't got to the on the run part, but it's such a beautiful thing, and I just want to get there. But man, okay, I'll slow it down. We'll get to David being on the run.
And Peter, that's a good point too. Also, that you were saying it's easy for us to look at the story now and say certain things, but matter of fact, if David could look back now with the entire canon like us, he probably would view it similar to us. So when we look at these characters in especially in the Old Testament, it's easy for us to kind of throw them underneath the bus and say, shouldn't they see this and shouldn't they see that? And the other thing is, we know that man left to himself can't find any peace. That's one thing from a depravity standpoint. A man, if God just leaves him to himself, can't find peace. But there's a difference between God leaving a man to himself and not finding peace, and God sending an evil spirit. So if God sends an evil spirit, Saul will not be able to find any type of peace. Much like any mankind, there is no peace outside of a relationship with the Lord, and that's a good point that we can draw from this with Saul.
Yeah. Now, if verse 9 wouldn't have been here to tell us that, okay? Not only is God moving Saul, but God is also moving David. Even though David is going away, God is moving David where he would have him to be in future days while he runs from Saul. So this is the catalyst. Saul is the catalyst that God used to move David in other arenas. And so that Saul don't know this and David don't know this, you know. But God always of a catalyst, and he works with human agencies to get us where he wants us, and he's gonna get David where he wants him.
That's that. David, and like I said, when you see how David moves versus Saul's movement, they're different. David is being literally strategically put in places by God everywhere that he goes. Whereas Saul is chasing him, you would say, look, Saul has chased him to Moab. No, it was God's plan. Everywhere David went, it had some type of understanding or meaning, even to the point where David went back to those that he warred with. And they said, oh, man, y'all make too much too fast. All right, let's get back to David on the run. All right, so I told you it's a good story. So David is now fleeing from the table. And where could he go? He's this close to Saul. So Saul is like, hey, I know he went home. He couldn't get far. So David's wife, the one that he, after killing Goliath, and after one, oh, you can't have this one, but you can have this one. Look how it works out to his benefits. Now, I'm not saying he got married with the mindset that this was going to happen, but the woman that he married liked him. Like, that's important. She liked David. This is her father. These are her brothers. This is her kingdom. But her alliance was to who? Her man. And why is that? Because these people did not just take the scriptures lightly. When a man and a woman come together, they become. So how can I let my one get killed? It wouldn't sit right with me. So she took the house idols, more statues in the house, and she put them in the bed. She put some goat hair in there, and they came up. Saul said, I'm still going to go up there and kill him. He didn't come down. I'm going to go up. And he went to kill him. And this is where Saul starts to feel that betrayal even more. My son first. First my kingdom. Then my son. Now my daughter. Saul has even forgotten. These are the things that Jonathan is reminding him, like, you're forgetting that this is your son. You're not pursuing an animal. But even in the pursuing, David takes it the other way. He says, you are pursuing something so lowly. You're a king. Why are you chasing me? These are questions that they have conversations back and forth. And Saul, we talked about that. So we can go to, okay. So we can go pick up 1 Samuel 19:18. All right, so Saul, after he escaped, if y'all anything in there y'all want to talk about between those verses that I just went to? All right, cool. All right, so now David escaped. And when he escaped, he went to Samuel at Ramah. And he told all that Saul had done to him. And Samuel went and dwelt in the north. Now, when he told Samuel this, how does Samuel feel about Saul?
How does he feel?
How does Samuel feel about Saul?
He basically said he loves Saul.
He loves Saul, but he's remorseful because Samuel also loves God more than he loves Saul. And when that was torn away, it was almost like, this was supposed to be the guy. You know, this was supposed to be the guy that held it all together, and he's not. And David is reporting this, and he also knows what David's role is, that David is the future king. So how is Samuel in the middle of this? Well, they did what they could do best. They prophesied all night. And then as more people got sent down there to find out what was going on, guess what they did? They prophesied too. And then it got to a point where Saul said, you know what, this is, and guess what happened when he went down there? It was prophesied. So all of this now, when they say prophesied, I had to go back and I said, well, it's a bunch of people prophesizing. They make them all prophets, and they, But what it is basically saying, they were speaking of things to come to each other. Each man down there knew what was to come. And they did that. They kept saying, because it says, when I went back and looked up in that the Strongs, it says prophesied is to bring forth knowledge, seed, information. So they were down there sharing information about everything. They were prophesied. And Samuel and all of the leaders are down there. And David. So David is not only in a place where people would think he should run, he's down in a place getting information. He's down there receiving prophecy from everybody who comes that way, and God has designed it. Did I miss anything?
No.
They start prophesying. More people came in as they went. Hey, go ahead.
Well, just to go back, finish up on the point Ken was saying, it keeps saying here, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers. Okay. And it says it at least 2 or 3 times, said the Spirit of God came upon the messenger. So as we said, God is orchestrating this, moving it forward.
Moving forward. So everybody who came down there, it's as if they walked through a wall, and when they walked through that wall, everything that they came for, they saw and heard things different.
When I'm reading, I'm just trying to fathom how Saul's mind, where he must be, because his loyal servants, if the king sends somebody for you, they're gonna come get you. But in his state of mind, I guess he couldn't grasp it, that God is in control of this. God is working this, and his own centuries guards that he sent to get David. They start prophesying when they got there, instead of getting David and bringing him back. That's all told them to do.
And everybody who goes, they got down there and something came upon them. We know it was God, came upon all of those people, and they changed. Something about them changed. Going to trace David, even in wrath, in anger, in order, when they got there, something about them changed to where they prophesied. Sound very familiar, right? It's a lot of similarity draped into these books, because we are looking at, as we know, the lesser David, the greater David, the lesser Christ, the greater Christ. We see those similarities. They're in there. This is why the New Testament is good. So we know that David is on the run, right? And now David is further on the run. And after everybody finished prophesying, they arose and Jonathan went into the city. Now this is Jonathan's second attempt. Oh, wait a minute. I got a little too ahead. No, right.
You fine.
All right. So this is Jonathan's second attempt. Jonathan still loves David in spite of his dad throwing a spear, trying to kill him. Jonathan said, "You know what, David? I'll put my neck in the line of this. I'm going to ask him. We're going to do something that, we're going to find out if my dad really wants to kill you. And this is how we're going to know. I'm going to go to dinner with him. And it's a dinner that everybody's supposed to be at. Your seat's going to be empty. I'm going to tell him you went home to do the dinner with your brothers. And what's going to happen is my dad's going to be like, oh, David. Now, this is Jonathan. Oh, go get David. I miss him so much. Bring him here and sit him in my chair, because that's my son. He's supposed to be here. This is Jonathan's mindset. My father would want his son here. That's Jonathan's mindset. But David is like, wait a minute. I got some questions to ask. Because last time I went with this plan, I had to run. There was a spirit on him. John's like, no, I got it. This time it's going to be me. It's no way that my dad will look at me and say, bring David home. My son is requesting it. We find out different. All right. And Jonathan, when David fled from Narwoth, and after Saul had came and after everything finished, he went to Narwoth, and Jonathan went with him. And he asked Jonathan a simple question. What have I done? This is 1 Samuel 20, verse 1. What have I done? What is my crookedness? And what is my sin before your father that he seeks my life? So he's putting some things in perspective. Jonathan, what did I do? And Jonathan says to him, far be it, you're not going to die. See, my father has no big matter or small matter which he disclosed to me. And this is what I was saying earlier, that Jonathan believes that his dad is still the same person. He's still going to give him the same information, the same love. And it's not there. It's not there. But Jonathan does see a greater promise in David. A promise so much that in the second time they meet, or that first time, they made a certain type of covenant. I kept saying it's important because he said what to David? That I will what? That you will preserve my line, not my dad's. He said preserve.
Oh, you mean the promise he made to Jonathan?
Jonathan
asked him, said, will you preserve my line?
Don't do
Take, because David was supposed to take all away. Okay, according to what God directed him, if you get down the line. Okay, but he made a covenant with Jonathan that I will not take your whole line, because he did have a son. Jonathan had a son.
Good. That's why this covenant is important. Everything that is done in the Bible is not wasted. No wasted words. It just might take you a minute to get there and say, what are they doing? Why is this? Because we got the whole story. And I've learned sometimes when you read the whole story, especially how we break down the scriptures, sometimes we'll get a passage And that passage might be for that moment, and it might expand into something else. But sometimes we need to see the whole story to understand not just the passage of that story, but the whole story. Man, I want to tell you about Jonathan so bad, but man, it's like episodes way down the line. It's crazy. It's like they all playing in my head. All right, so Jonathan is really telling David, he's like, look, my father's okay. It's not bad. It's not bad on you. Still in 20. It's not bad on you. This is what we're gonna do. I'm gonna go to dinner, empty seat. He said, if that don't work and my father is not well, I'm gonna go out here and I'm gonna shoot some arrows and I'm gonna give a certain code and it's gonna tell you what to do. So Jonathan says, so he goes and he sits at the dinner and he tells him. Saul's like, day one is like, nah, where's David? Because in Saul's mind, it's like, this is the perfect opportunity to kill him. If I have him here captive like I had him before, he's not getting away again. I will not fail twice. This is what Saul is thinking. And David has the Spirit of God leading him away from these situations. So he doesn't go. And we see what happened to Jonathan, right? What did Saul do to Jonathan? He is forever throwing his spear at people. He threw his own spirit at son. And from that moment, Jonathan understood where his father was going. He understood that the covenant that was with his father was not going to last. He knew that the way that the kingship worked is when a new king comes in, he wipes everything out. And what was going to be the difference with David? It wasn't, right? Saul's mind is when he becomes king, we're all dead. You're dead. Your kid's dead. The dogs, the goat, the cow, everybody goes. Total annihilation, because Saul knows what about God?
Oh, instructions that he received, God wipes everybody out.
He knows this. He knows that that this is not David. Now I'm gonna spill the beans again. Saul knows that it's not David he's trying to stop. Saul's trying to stop God. If I can kill David, then the prophecy that Samuel said that the kingdom of Israel will be torn from me, it will never happen. Only thing I have to do is kill David. You want to know what Saul's mindset was? I just told you. The only thing I have to do is kill David, and I'll have the kingdom of heaven forever. It'll be all mine. Yeah, I laughed too when I thought about that. I said, man, I can't believe this is his mindset. But we have a lot of people that walk around there in this mindset right now, because that mindset is just a mindset of self. If I can be the God in my life, then I don't need a David. I will pursue all the Davids that come around me to try to stop me from thinking like that. Kill them all. So I always say, I think about stuff like, which guy?
And that's important. We see the big picture, like you just said, because in just reading the story, we'll see him fighting against David, because that's what the scripture says. He was fighting against David. But the deep of this is that God is appointed a man to be in office, or appointed a man to be in office, and anybody fight against that man that what God has ordained, they are fighting against God.
Yeah.
Now they might not know it.
Which I want to ask.
Yeah, they are fighting against God.
You think Saul did it? You think Saul
That
did
he
it?
was fighting against God? No, not in the depth I'm talking about now. He's fighting against David because he's trying to invite God. He's trying to invite David to dinner, not God. He's just trying to keep his kingdom.
That's the point I
And
want
so-
to make. I don't think Saul knew that he was fighting against God.
No, what he was fighting against was what God has ordained.
The prophecy. Right.
Okay, the
That's
prophecy.
that different.
Right, okay, it's just like I made a statement, someone fighting against their pastor, they better be careful, or anybody who God has put in any office, because they're fighting against not just that office and that person, but they're fighting against what God has ordained, and they will lose every time. It might seem like it's a long road for them to lose, but they'll lose because this is God ordained David to be where he would have him.
So it's like,
Again, that's why it's important that we make this statement that as you read the word, the spirit, evil spirit came upon Saul. Okay. And then the Spirit of God came upon the messenger. So we see as you progress here, how God is moving us across here. But like I said, Saul is blind to this. He cannot see it.
Yeah, but like he said earlier, then we got the lesser greater and the greater
Right.
David, right? So even though the Spirit of the Lord came upon Saul, Saul is still responsible.
Yes, he is.
It's like there was a danger to crucify Jesus.
Mhm.
Those prophecies being fulfilled. But those people who crucified him are still responsible.
Right.
This is just how the sovereignty of God works in his dealing. Jesus said, I came for his very purpose, you know, but every time they got ready to kill him when it wasn't his time, somehow he got away.
Right.
Somehow David keep getting away.
Yeah, we see a common pattern. So when I say against God, right? I'm not saying that Saul is sitting in his throne and saying, you know what, if I win, I could take down God.
Yeah, no.
But he does know, just like everybody else know, that David is the anointed. This is common amongst the land. And if he's anointed, now we have to realize that Israel didn't look at God how some of us look at it today. This is no shot. They looked at it different. They looked at it as if you were anointed by God. And if you were a man of God and I crossed you, I didn't cross you. You're just a vessel. I crossed the living God. And we'll see this as David is on the run. You'll see what his prayers are about. He's not praying saying, hey, they're trying, because he keeps telling Saul, he's like, I'm a flea. Like, I'm a nobody. You came and got me out my dad's house from the farm. So you brought me to this place. Why are you trying to kill me? He's asking Saul a question that cannot be answered by Saul. But we have the whole text. So in hindsight, we know that Saul, his pursuit of David, isn't really the pursuit of David. Because what is the reason that he's trying to kill David?
To maintain his line. To maintain
He's trying to kill
royalty.
He wants to kill David because he wants to stay the
in
king.
power,
And
yeah.
who told Saul that he wasn't going to be the king?
Samuel.
Samuel. And who does Samuel work for? I mean, work for in the sense of.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So you see what I'm saying? Saul's not. We gotta stop and really look at this chart. Because right there, we will give Rome so much credit as this great empire. But at the same time, Rome was just a baby. Saul was a king of a nation of people. So I'm not going to sit here and say Saul what Saul may or may not have known. I'm not going to insinuate. I'm just going to tell you that if Other Walker was in Saul's position, one of the things that I would have in my mind is, and I'm not saying it, I'm just looking at it from somebody and having some sympathy on him. I would say, if I kill David, I get to keep the kingdom of heaven. So all I have to do is kill David. I don't care what Samuel said. I don't believe what Samuel said. I can change prophecy. Saul believed that. We see it. He pursues David everywhere. I mean, his pursuits came so many times that he would say, man, I'm after David over here, right? And what will come to stop Saul from going after David? The one thing that he should have been taking care of in the first place, the Philistines. We'll see that. Every time David ran, who came to fight Saul? And the Philistines came, and Saul had to deviate his path. It's actually a mountain when I went and I was studying it. Where David got away at one of the things, that was like, Saul had to go and fight the Philistine. They called that the path of divide. Because he had to leave. Saul had to choose. Do I go and kill David? I have him, I can do it. Or do I go war with the Philistines and keep Israel intact? Saul still had a job. Israel still wasn't going to fall apart. And Saul was the sword that was swinging. Him and David picked it up early in the game. What you got?
I know exactly where you're going with Saul not being like, I'm just gonna go against God. But I was pushing the envelope, Petey. And what I mean is, as believers, we have to understand when God says something, we're talking about the sovereignty, right? In the beginning of Genesis, he said, I will put enmity. That means war. That means battle, right? So people understand that God hates sin, but on the flip side, we're surprised at mankind without the Spirit of God. Paul describes them this way. He says they're haters of God. So the default, if you're not a lover of God, there's no gray area. You're either a lover of God or you're a hater of God. And there are people who are without the Spirit of God who hate God and would actually in their mind feel like they can defeat him. So we're not saying about Saul. I'm just saying I want us to understand when we see the haters of God in the world, as believers, we shouldn't be surprised at the aggressive nature of the world against godly things. That's why he flat out told us, do not love the world. What is he saying? Hate the world, Petey. Hate the system of the world. Dennis?
Bringing it up to the contemporary. I think it's why the Jews have been hated universally all down through the centuries, is because Satan wants to keep Christ from being able to rule. So if it gets rid of them, just like Saul wanted to get rid of David, prophecy will not be fulfilled. God's plan will be fulfilled. God allows Satan to do this, just like apparently Saul. But this is why we're seeing this Zechariah 12 being fulfilled right now before our eyes, where everything is going to be turning against that little city of Jerusalem, because Satan is trying to prevent this from happening, just like Saul wanted to keep it.
Yeah, and I'm hearing him saying this, but he's just telling the story from the linear side.
Right.
Because the Bible is giving us the linear side. So he's already said that. I know you get to what they're saying.
I get it.
Because actually, you're all right. These people literally hate God. Now, they're not saying I hate God, but what they're saying, Satan's side, Satan knows prophecy. He knows there's gonna be a millennial reign with Israel. He knows this. He's trying to stop that, okay? But those who are workers for Satan, for instance, let's use this here Saul, for instance. You don't know that. So Satan has got a foundation laid, but everybody who's been in Satan don't know it's Satan's foundation, like when it was crucifying Jesus, or when it was plotting to. That was God ordained for Satan's foundation, so they didn't know it was Satan's foundation. Okay, so actually they was trying to stop what God has ordained for the future. That's when actually, had they knew what they was doing, they wouldn't have crucified him. So they didn't know, like Saul didn't know. The bigger scheme of this was trying to stop God's ordained prophecy. So in trying to get rid of Israel, the bigger scheme of trying to get rid of Israel is what God has prophesied for the future for Israel. But those people who trying to get rid of Israel don't know that. Go ahead.
So we have the whole text. So anytime the Old Testament is talked about, a lot of times the new text is always going to be brought up, because most people will want to solidify what is already being said. And I'm with it. No wrong answers. No wrong answers. We are seeing a lot of what is being talked about. But let me paint this. We see it from the New Testament point of view. And we see a lot of things that leaves us with a lot of questions like, what, and I'm not answering these questions. By no means am I standing here saying I'm answering questions, but we all have questions from the New Testament. What was it like when Jesus would walk away? What was it like? Well, what was it like when David would get away? I'm not saying these two are the same, but it kind of, when I read it, I say, well, my mind the cogs start to turn. And when Jesus would go away to pray and be by himself, I say, man, what was he praying? I would never know that. But somehow, we tend to get led to get a clue. Because the whole time David was on the run, he was praying. It's proof of it in the Bible. All you got to do is go to the Psalm. So we ain't even got to David running away yet. Man, I tell y'all, make this so much fun. I have a blast. All right. Some people say you're not supposed to have fun, but I want to go back to what Saul said, because we get it's so good, and there's so many parts that we just want to nibble on at the feast. It's just whew. All right. So when Jonathan was sitting there, he was telling Saul said something to Jonathan.
Ooh, you talking about?
So if you go to first
talk
chapter,
about his mama.
wow, like he said this about the woman. Like, so when you go to 1 Samuel 20, chapter 30.
Verse 30.
Verse 30, I'm sorry. There's something Saul says to his son. After this whole thing, he's basically saying, why are you turning on me? I'm your dad. Yeah, but he says it in a way, he says, the displeasure of Saul burned against Jonathan, which means he was angry at Jonathan. He said, you son of a perverse, rebellious woman. Do you know, like but she ain't even, and you know the funny thing is, we're saying what she got to do with it, but she could be sitting right there. We think that like this is
She's sitting right there beside him.
When you mad, you blame everybody.
But Saul says this because Do I not know that you have chosen the son of Jesse to your own shame? He's not saying this because he cares for his son. He's saying this because he knows what's coming. He says, for the shame of your mother's nakedness. Now, when I dug into that, like you get into the whole nakedness thing, it's really the exposure of your mother's sin, because it was a sin for a woman to bear a child. That was but that's the nakedness he's talking about. He's not talking about stripping off the clothes. You get a lot of people who take these texts and sometimes go crazy. But that's the sin.
Now that you painted that picture, you painted that picture real good just then. Go ahead.
Okay, so that is what he's talking about. Your mother conceived you in birth, and this is what you're going to do to me. Because the very next line in 31, he says, for as long as Jesse's son lives on the earth, you shall not be established in your reign. And now send and bring to me, for he is the son of death. He's calling David the son of death, and David is doing nothing but being out here conquesting for Israel, giving Israel new life. Now, he might be the son of death, killing 200 Philistines just to get their foreskins, but he had a purpose. But on that side, they should be saying it, but not the king. Not the king about somebody who is a servant in Israel with him. Right? He's saying like, yo, this is it. You giving up everything to him. You're giving everything away to somebody who's going to kill our lineage. So does that seem like Saul is saying that because he wants to kill David because, David is just a bad guy? No. Saul's mindset is about his lineage, his line. This was a thing with kings. Do you know that some people look at the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel and some of Chronicles, and they call it the book of prophets and kings, because this is the royalty. You want to watch Game of Thrones? Go ahead. I'm gonna watch this one because this is a way better movie. But and it's dragons not in here, but it's dragons in there. But I type dragon show. What I'm getting at is that this is a family in crisis. The son, the father, and they're all chasing somebody who constantly says, like, why y'all chasing me? All of you have royalty. All of you are this. I'm just a guy who is over here shepherding sheep. And it's very familiar that Jesus kind of asked a lot of them same questions too. Why y'all chasing me? What lie have I told? I've only told the truth. Everything that I said has been right here in the scriptures, the ones that you read. You search for salvation in those, but you can't even find it because I'm telling you it's right here. So David is saying the same thing. You're trying to kill me and you already have the kingdom. So nobody's taking it from you. If it's going to be given to me, it'll be in my old age. I'm willing to take it when it comes like that. But you keep rushing this because you're not fighting me. Now, I say when they was on a run. Now, I told you that Jonathan and David, they knitted their relationship, and he made a promise. All right.
Before you go,
Move that. Sorry.
Before you go, Jonathan even asked his father the same question that David asked Jonathan.
Mm-hmm.
And what was the result? The same answer. A spear came towards his head.
Because it couldn't find it. If I can't find it, I got to kill it. So they made this thing. And every time that David leaves, Jonathan said, and this is after they made it, they wept and they kissed and they knitted their friendship, and he made a promise saying, take care of my son. Take care of my, no matter what goes on, just make sure you take care of my son. Don't leave me without. And David said, you know what, man, you're my brother. Man, you're not just you're my brother. Like, who got a brother in here? I got sisters. I didn't have a brother, but the friends that I made along the way that I call brother, yeah, we are run and we have to. You see what I'm saying? Like, and I take it that we got people in here who have that, and I say brother just with the term of the word because it's sisterhood. That's family. That's what family does. And David was looking out for Jonathan was looking out for his family, and David in return said, I will always look out for y'all. I think that, if I left this earth sooner than later, I think my daughters will be in good hands just because of the people I got here. So my being is tied to y'all just like y'all to me. And we might not be perfect, but we try. And that's what Jonathan was telling David. I'm family, and we ain't messing this up. So they set things in order. Now,
God's ways are not our ways. I was thinking about Esau and Jacob, how the older was going to get, the inheritance, and God didn't intend that because he had said that the older would serve the younger. And here a dynasty, they're trying to keep the dynasty line, like you said, in their line. Like Herod, if Herod could stay on the throne, he was sitting on the throne about powder keg. It was people looked at Herod, he got in there by hook or crook, but God never intended for Herod to stay there and to be the king of the Jews. It was Jesus. So even in that dynasty of the Herodians was broke up, by God.
It's yeah, I mean, when you start to look at this book and you pick it apart, you see that the dynasties that were in place were only there because God allowed it. God, I mean, it's very simple. God allowed it. We could sit here and try to pick it apart and say, why did it? God allowed it. Like
Again, as like I said, you had said if we didn't have a New Testament, we would be veiled just like then, you know, we would probably make the same choice.
now, remember when there's a story in the New Testament and Jesus is telling them about the Sabbath and things to do, and he talks about the showbread and breaking rules basically when they were eating. He had a lot of times where he's talking about rules and they were eating, and he brought up the showbread, right? And everybody who's heard this story, I say, well, what showbread story is Jesus talking about? Because a lot of people just hang out in the New Testament. They hang out there. This is not a bad thing. Please do not take this as a bad thing. But if you went and asked anybody, who are they talking about? Show? Oh, he's talking about David. Okay, what happened in that? So a lot of them couldn't. So we're getting ready to get that understanding of what is getting ready to happen. So David is on the run. And David has his men with him on the run. And as David is moving, they need food. This is not a little bit of men. How many is it? How many David got with him?
I think 400 on it.
I think it's like 40. He
$400.
got a squad with him. He got to feed them. And you're going to see later on, I like to say later on because it comes on later in episodes, but it's like, you're going to see how this food is actually very important to David and how they're moving around. But at this point, David is on the move. And he goes into the temple. There's some bread up there. They call it showbread. Now, showbread is just the bread that they set out because they had made the sacrifice bread the day before. And now the old bread is up there, and the showbread is old bread till the new bread comes. Now, this bread up there is supposed to be given away. Nobody's supposed to get this bread. This bread is for the Lord. This means no one eats this bread. David comes in there like, hey, I'm on the run from Saul. Aren't you a priest? And he's like, yeah, but I don't know if you're supposed to be here because everybody in the land is looking for you. And David's like, no, I don't want to lie. Just let me get the bread. He's like, I can't give you that bread. He's like, come on. You see what I'm going through. Give me the bread. And the priest's like, you know what? All right, here's the bread. That's the abridged version, but we know that David went through a lot of conversation to get the bread. But in the background of getting the bread, having this conversation, there was a hater in the room. And that hater was just standing in the corner like, I can't wait to get back to Saul and tell him everything. I see you. His name is what?
Dog.
Dog.
I call him Dog.
Dog. Because he was up here telling. Everybody thinks the same thing about us. He going back and telling everything. And he did. He did. He went back and told everything. He went back and told everything how it happened. But before that, we see another almost very similarity of old and new. Because like the showbread part was, Jesus was talking about it, but he talked about it for a particular reason, because the showbread part leads us to understanding why Jesus had got taken in front of a certain person. And what did that certain person call Jesus?
You talking about Pontius Pilate, or you talking about the priest?
They took him down. It was a couple kings that Jesus went to see when he was being crucified. One of them said, this guy's a madman. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Get him out of here. He's no king of the Jews. I can't. This guy's a madman. No, they called Jesus crazy. This guy's a madman. Why do you bring him here? He's saying he's the king of the Jews. He doesn't. Who is this guy? He's crazy. Get him out of here. Take him back. I can't see nothing wrong with him. That's your problem. Because we just talked about that. Who was the king of the Jews at the time? So who did they take him to? And Herod said, this guy's crazy. Get him out of here. But it's funny, David himself actually goes back to the people in Gath. Now remember, Goliath was from Gath. So David showing up at the door is a desperation attempt. I have nowhere else to go. So I'm gonna go to the people
back to the Palestine
that I killed. I killed a couple of them. Now, I say this because it's to paint the mindset of David. David doesn't even know what he knows. Because David is actually running. He's trying to figure it out while he's out there. So we know that David is still human. He's still stressing. David does not possess all of the information. That's where that difference. Jesus did. Can you imagine if David knew everything in a time, how he would have moved completely? Oh, Saul coming to get me, don't worry about it. I'll just stay here until you get there, do what I need to do, and then I'll just walk over here. Because that's what Jesus did. Jesus knew everywhere he was supposed to be and the time he was supposed to be there. He kept saying, it's not my time, gotta go. It's not my time, gotta go.
Who was teaching on the election where we said you can't die If you really like, and we would know that, like David did know, but you can't die before you're saved.
Right.
You know? So David would have, because God had already ordained that David would be the king. You know, that will happen. So really, David was kind of like invincible, but didn't know.
And he did. Remember what I said? We look at the lesser, right? The lesser Christ. He didn't know. The greater Christ had full knowledge of everything.
God would move his heart to rock.
Right.
So he wouldn't stand in harm's way. So it wouldn't be like if he stood there in the spirit with a hit, would he kill it? Now God, you know, will move his heart to move to keep him out of harm's way, to keep him alive that his plan may come to fruition.
Because he is God's child. He's being protected without even.
Would have known. He would have took chances he shouldn't have taken.
He would have.
Yeah.
But every time David was about to take a chance that he shouldn't take, what did he do? He consulted the Lord. David prayed, hey, do I go take this camp that you're trying to send me at? Or what about the people that's in Judah? Should I go take it? David always asked questions and he prayed. So David is on a run. Now, when I was saying David is on a run, and I said earlier, like, I really want to know what was Christ like when he would go away and like we get that mystery. I said, well, the only thing I can look at is the lesser Christ and see what he did when he was on a run. And he was very accused. And I'm not saying they did the same thing, but it gives me understanding. Let's go to Psalms. I don't know, let's start at 3. And y'all tell me, what do we see here? Now, I want you to keep in the mindset, these are the Psalms of David. I'll read it. Oh Lord, how my adversaries have increased. Now, this conversation is going different. If I was King Saul, it's like, man, my adversaries increased. I'm not telling the Lord because we see later on that Saul and the Lord, they're not even communicate. He can't get it in dreams or visions. So, but we see that David is on the run and he is praying. Psalms. Oh Lord, my adversaries have increased. Many rising up against me. Many say of me, there is no deliverance from him. For him in God. Shelah. But you, O God, are the shield of me, my esteem, and the one lifting my head up. I cried to God with my voice, and he heard me from the holy mountain. Shelah. Now he's praying. David is praying a prayer on the run. If you keep going through them, and if you read these in accordance with what he's going through in the Psalms, you'll see that David was praying, answer me when I call. I'm on the run. Help me, Lord. Please, because they are after me. Now, there's a thing that, you know, when I was looking at you'll hear people say, well, when you get it, because you can follow this all the way up to like the, I think like the 23rd, 22nd Psalm, you'll start to see the transition. It becomes more of talking about the kingdom now because the running is over. You'll see it. But if you think about when they talk about like the crucifixion and everything, I said Rome was a very infant nation. So guess what Rome was doing? Crucifying people. David wasn't just fighting them. He was fighting anybody who was going against or growing against God. So when they talk about crucifixion, because crucifixion, everybody think the crucifixion came so much later. It didn't. Rome was there. And that was their way of torturing people, criminals. David was talking about it in Psalm 23. He's like, they're trying to crucify me. And we see a lot of that in the prophecy because that Psalm talks about the crucifixion. Ma'el. We see a lot of the connection to what God said on the cross. We see a lot of the bulls around me. The Romans, I believe they were considered like the bulls, and the Philistines were considered the dogs. So these names that we see, they actually was happening. Now, I'm not trying to humanize the things that were going on because these were definitely miracles that were happening.
You're just showing the congruency between
there you go.
Old Testament and New Testament.
I'm showing how both of the whole text is what is needed to get the understanding of what's going on. Now, I'm not saying that this is for me and those who like to digest the Bible. And I've heard the pastor say, hey, look, salvation, if you believe, salvation is yours. You ain't got to open it up ever again. But I also say this. How do I have a conversation with my Father? How do I hear his voice? Most of the thing says God said. Word. So this is where I'm at with it to learn. This is not saying that anybody else in there, but this is why I go in depth to find out what was Rome doing, because this is my history. This is if we as believers, we might not have the history of the Israelites, their history of that past, but this is my history. I need to know what the king did so I can understand how a king's supposed to act. And then I understand what a king's not supposed to do, so I know the king that I have. I know the king that I got.
And
So-
and people when they, and anytime we're talking about God's word, we know we're talking about God's people. So if somebody's not saved, we're not talking to them. But as God's people, it's important for us to understand that people will be like, oh, the Old Testament is just the Old Testament, right? There is absolute congruency between the Old Testament and the New Testament. People just have to take the time and not be lazy, because we have the Spirit of God to see how connected. It's the same God in the Old Testament as in the New Testament, maybe a different dispensation, but the same principles. Like you're talking about king, then okay, now we have a president. Same thing. We're saying leader, and at the end of the day, we know who our ultimate leader is, Petey. And I'm glad we have these discussions, because people really, I was guilty when I first started studying the Bible. It was like, that Old Testament stuff is boring. I don't get it. Them old stories, they were killing people. There's all this craziness stuff. But when you really start, by the Spirit of God, starting to dive in his word, you will see what you're painting, that there is the sameness, the oneness.
It's one story that's connected through over thousands and thousands of years of history. The history part is important. I'm not saying it like just, I'm not saying you have to go in and learn about history, but how do you know the king? Like, what is the king? Like, people say, well, Jesus, like we get certain examples that we get to see in the Old Testament that are amplified, magnified of the greatness that we have in God. And the very next verse of the very next chapter, after we talked about David being a madman, going up there, and the guy like, yo, you can't come here. I'm packed up on madman. Take it somewhere else. So David goes to a cave. And when David goes to a cave, this is 22:1. His whole family now is like, you know what? They're chasing my son. I guess I better go. So the brothers come, the mom come, and everybody in there. But it says something very particular in this one verse, and I like to read it. 22:1, it says, David went from there to escape. Now, David is on a run to the caves of Adullam. Did I say that right? Adullam. And his brother in his father's house heard it, and they went down there. So he's in a cave. They're all in there. And everyone who was in distress, listen who comes, who was in distress, who was in debt, and everyone bitter began to gather to him. So he became head over them, and there was about 400 men with him. David is on the run. David is on the run, and 400 people is on the run with him. Now, I'm not somebody who knows a lot, but I guarantee if 400 people was running through here in Jacksonville, it would make some type of stir, some type of noise. So Saul knew that the people were going to David. Scriptures tell us so, hindsight. So Saul knew that the people were going to David, and look at the people that are going. People who are in debt, people who are bitter, people who are just have had it from the oppression of what they're going through, the constant fighting. And who is this all coming from? Who rules over them as Israel? Saul. So it's not that they're saying, in an indirect way, they're saying we coming to David because we're running from Saul. I mean, these are the people that's following, right? And David went from there to Mitzvah of Moab. Now, we talk about David and these Moabs, right? Because David is a Moab. He got lineage from Moab. So he went back to his people. Now we're gonna notice that David is going to run through all the people. It was his great. Ruth was a Moabite. Now, that's true. So he went back to his people. So a lot of people may say, why is David going up to the Moabites? Those are people. He has some kin to him. So he's going for safety amongst his people. And did he find it there? Well, your mom and dad can stay, but you can't. And he got visited by somebody that's in the scriptures that we hear about. And like I said, I love to go and seek other books. It's not canonical, but there is a book of Gad. And the book of Gad talks about conversations he had with David, how he was a a prophet that gave David prophecies. And we see one here if you go to 22:5. All right. Now David, he goes back and say, hey, can we stay here? And the prophet Gad goes to David. Do not remain in the stronghold. Leave and go to the land of Judah. So David left and he went. Right then and there. He left. Mom and dad, I gotta go. I'm out of here. Now, this is where Saul is saying, like, look, all of y'all supposed to be loyal to me. And not one person is, because I have to go back a little bit. When David got the showbread, because I got so excited about it, he also took Goliath's sword. So David got a sword now, which means that David having a sword, not just a sword that was someone he slayed. That's why he said this one is greater than, this is a great sword. I'll take it. That sword is also a symbol of power. I got the sword that I killed Goliath. So he'll never have to swing that sword. You know, a lot of people in the old times, like medieval times, and as a kind of, some of them just carried swords just because people knew what they did with the sword. They knew, but David never did anything with the sword except cut his head off because he took him down with a
Slingshot.
took him down with a slingshot, but better yet, he took him down with God. With a rock. Put it soaking right into his head and then chopped his head. But that sword is a symbol of it. So Saul is now saying, like, look, what is going on? People are going over to him. Nobody here. You Benjamites, man, you turned on me, you sorry sap of saplings. And he cussing them out, but in his own way. All right, and he did go. And then here come, you go, hey, Saul, you know, David was up in there. Oh, was he? Who gave it? What happened? And he told him the whole story. And what did Saul do? Is anyone who helped David, Saul wiped them all the way out. He said, well, kill all of them. And all the priests standing here, fall down on them, take them out. Take them out. He's killing priests now. He has not only taken that fight to tear away the kingdom of God, he's killing the priest of God. Saul is like, I'm already here. I'm going to fully invest. So we see that Saul's fall is even further. And as we read it, this is not for me to badger Saul. I'm pointing out what the scriptures say about Saul. But I also want to point out what David said about Saul. And that is the most important part. And we'll get to that later. Please put it in your book, put a star by it. What David says about Saul is important because it's a conversation that we often, well, me personally, wouldn't think about, that Christ might be having about me amongst the people who come to him and say, well, he should just kill Petedy. He out there doing whatever. He ain't even. And I could see David saying, why would I want to touch one of God's anointed? I died for him. Why would I want to destroy what I died for? It makes no sense. Kind of what David is saying. Why would I want to kill my father? Why would I want to kill somebody who's given this to me? Why would I want to harm him? We'll see all. So, but Saul is not in that mode. Saul is killing everybody and anybody that comes into contact with you.
Well, remember, one thing that I felt, what I saw in there, that when he wanted the priest killed, he turned his own guard. But even his guard were what? Saying, no, we're not doing this because of what? They were fear of somebody greater than him. Okay. So who did he get to kill him? The same one they, old dog.
Yeah, I'm out here telling everything. I'm about to go ahead and slaughter him because that'll make me your right-hand man. That'll make me your priest. And we know that this priest is a false priest. You see it. All right. So he struck him. Come on. But one of them got away. And the one that got away was, I'm about to.
One of the sons of
How we say his name? Abiathar?
Abiathar.
Chapter verse 20. Abiathar.
22.
I think I'm saying that right now. Forgive me, I'm butchering. David said to Abiathar, I knew this day would come when I seen Doeg, the Edomite, was there. That he would certainly inform Saul. And he didn't say, man, it's Saul's fault. It's Saul's fault that he killed all the people, and Saul's a bad person, and one day I'm gonna get Saul. The way he talks about Saul is how one should talk about somebody, even if it's their enemy. He said, I'm accountable for all the lives of your father's house. I'm accountable. I did that. I went in there and got the showbread. Even though I was running from Saul, I did that. He took accountability of it, and he didn't put it on Saul. He put the ownership on him. But we all know with hindsight, that Saul was the one that did it. So he said, remain with me and do not fear, for he who seeks my life, seeks your life, but with me, you're safe. In other words, stay with me, we're safe. All right. Whew. Thought we was gonna make it to 24, but it's up to y'all. Want to stop for another 15 minutes? I talk about this all night. It's raining outside too. All right, y'all let y'all tell me when to stop. I can make it to 24. I'll be a happy man. Huh? As far look, all right. As far so I'm gonna go through this without leaving information out. So we see that David is praying. We see some of the prayers in the Psalms. We see that David is on a run. Now David is now on a run, and he gets to a town, and he says, "See the Philistines." I'm at 23:1, and inform. Hold on, let me go back. Sorry. All right, so they informed David, and David says, "See, the Philistines are fighting against Quarleha, and they are plundering the threshing floor," which means they were out there. The Philistines were doing what the Philistines do, the thing that they wore with Israel. They were going to take their food. The threshing floor is where the wheat was kept, and most of the time when they would go and raid these towns, it was to supply their army. The Philistines, if you think about it, they were just people that were going around taking what they wanted when they wanted. Remember, I said I gave the similarity.
Gideon.
Gideon.
Yeah, they make food.
Yeah,
They wait till the first time of year in the house.
So
They would take the food.
David now does what I've been saying. His obedience, even before he make a move. So David inquired of God, saying, "Shall I go and strike these Philistines?" And God said to David, "Go and smite the Philistines and save Quarleha." And David's men, and David's men said, I'm 23:3. "See, we are in Judah and are afraid. How much more if we go to Quarleha against the armies?" Basically, David's men are afraid. They're like, "Look, we already afraid here. You want us to go and try to save somebody else?" So David asked another question. He went back to God, right? People inquired. David was one of them type of people, like, okay, I'm gonna go back to God. So David inquired again, and he answered him. And he said, "Go down and arise, for I give the Philistines to your hand." God is telling David, go and win this war, because I have a greater reason for you to go do it. And David goes down there, and he saves the men. He forced the Philistines, and he led away their livestock, struck them with a great smite, and thus David saved the inhabitants of Quarleha. So he did what he was supposed to do. And the son of the priest came, just fled to David in Quarleha, and he went down he gave him a shoulder garment. Now, the shoulder garment was what was worn by the true priests. These are things that they had, because remember, they struck him down and took all this stuff. So him fleeing with the shoulder garments is like he's branding like, look, this is what Saul did. Saul has killed all the priests. This is it. It's all up there. He struck them all down. And we already know this, right? In Inform, it says, Saul then, after all the fighting and everything, and he brings shoulder garments up and say, "Here's it in your hand." Saul informs David, hey, Saul's like, did God just wrap David did he just gift him to me by putting him up there in a stronghold? You know, in those gates, he can't get out. Because if you think about how the cities were, right? When you went into a city, that city became your stronghold. David only got a few men in that city with them. They sacked it. Everybody else is done. The women, the men, all. It's a city that's just the inhabitants that are there, that live there. So now these people got a question. Saul has a bigger army than David. Y'all sure we want to keep David here? He did save us. He got a big army. So David goes back and he says, "Hey, are the people going to give me up?" And God says, "Yeah." He said, "Well, is Saul coming down?" God says, "Yeah." So what do you think David did with the information that God gave him? He took off. "All right, y'all, I saved your town, but I can't stay here because I'm on the run." And as he was on a run, it rose, let me read this. "And the landowners of Quarleha is going to surrender me into his hands," because he was talking to God. God answered him, right? Said, "Yeah, the men are going to give it." And he said, "O God of Israel, I pray, let your servant know." And he said, he is coming down, because he's talking about David. I'm basically repeating what I said, but via the scriptures. And David said, "Are the landowners of Quarleha going to surrender me and my men into the hands of Saul?" And God said, "They're going to surrender you." Kevin's answer is pretty simple. So I just saved these people and they're going to surrender me. But it's for that purpose. Because when Saul got there, and David and his men, about 600, because now the numbers are growing, they rose and they left because God told them to leave. And Saul was informed that David escaped Quarleha, and he ceased to go out. And David remained in the wilderness in the stronghold, maybe the hill countries inside. And that's where David is out in the wilderness. He's just Like they're looking for him, he's just out there. Some similar to the wilderness that they kind of crossed through, and they talk about that later on, how David is actually going further, either further past Judah or going more inland to the wilderness. David is everywhere. He is a king that's learning his lands to a point where he knows where everything is and the people that are around. All right. So now Jonathan is like, look, I need to get out here and see David again. That's my friend. I ain't seen him in a while. So he goes out to see him. And he tells him, do not fear, Saul, my dad is going to find you. You are reign over Israel. I'm at
Verse 17.
16.
Verse 17.
Oh, I was going to backtrack a little
I'll
bit.
go back now.
So 16 and 17. And David saw that Saul had come. Man, I went too far back. Let's do 15 to 18. Now see how y'all. And David saw that Saul had come out to seek his life while David was in the wilderness. Remember, I said he had went back into the wilderness after he left. And Jonathan, Saul's son, arose and went to David in Horesh. And he strengthened his hand in God. And he said, do not fear, for the hand of Saul, my father, is not going to find you. You are to reign over Israel, and I am to be next to you. This is a very powerful statement. Even my father knows that. And they made a covenant before God, and David remained at Horesh, and Jonathan went to his whole house. Now, it is important that this particular thing that Jonathan just said is monumental for him to say to David. Not only does Israel know you're the king and you're going to reign, but I know it. And not only do I know it, remember the question we had, if Saul knew that David was going to reign over the kingdom? Did the question not get answered? Saul knew that David was going to be the king. Saul wanted to stop that. Saul knew that because who told him? Saul knew who he was going up against. We all in life, know people who know what they're going up against. Yet they keep trying to go up against it. All right. So he's hiding. David is on a run, and he remained. Him and Jonathan came to reassure him, right? And the Zephites came to Saul and Gilead saying, is David not hiding in strongholds of rest? Like they pumping him up now. Like, how can you let him hide in your land? Which is in the south of the waistline? Oh, now, sovereign, all the desires of being, come down. And our part is to render them into your hands. They sent up there the people he just saved. I said, come on down. He out here hiding. We giving him to you. He going to surrender. And it's like, wow, because this is what God told him was going to happen. And Saul, blessed are you of God, for you have sympathy with me. Saul is out here just giving out God's blessings. He is full, because at the end of the day, Saul is still what David will tell you later on, and anointed. Please go prepare yet further and find out and see the place where he hides. Like, go find him for me. For I'm told where he's cunning. You can't find him. You have to help us. So Saul is now on a hunt. Now we go down to 26. We know that Saul is all throughout the wilderness trying to get David, and he's like this back and forth cat and mouse. But when we get down to 26, 23, 26, and Saul went on one side of the mountain, and David went on the other side of the mountain. And David was hurrying to get away from Saul, for Saul and his men were surrounding him. They finally got the location. And a messenger came to Saul and said, hurry, and come, for the Philistines have invaded. So Saul turned back from pursuing against David and went to the Philistines. Therefore, they called the place Shelah Hama Leoth. I think I said that right. Court. I might have said them. The rock. There we go. Let's just do the translation. The rock of division. And David went up from there and remained in a stronghold in Gedi. All right. So I say that because it pointed out that point that I said every time that when David was almost close to being caught, what came about? The thorn of the Philistines, the ones that he should have been focused on. And I'm not a historian, this is more of like looking at things from a war perspective. If Saul would have took out the Philistines and eliminated them like it was supposed to eradicate them from the land,
He wouldn't have to be chasing David.
I can guarantee you if he would have did that from the get-go, and this is just the war-minded. I've seen I play a lot of video games where if you take out the force that is constantly poking you on the side, you could better focus your energy on that. But Saul now has roped himself into two constant battles, one within and one without. The one within is telling him I should be king. I need to kill David. That is my priority. But the one without is, hey, while you was up here chasing David by Koresh, the Philistines was getting to the back gate. But David, right? The division, the place of the division might sound like it was a pardon for David and Saul, but the division was in Saul. It wasn't in David and Saul. It was being divided on two sides of the mountains. It was a division in Saul, and Saul had finally started to see that I have to make a decision. Do I want to go pursue David or lose what little bit of Israel I got left in my hands? Nah, I can't. I'm gonna let David ride this time because Israel is too important to me. In other words, Saul was saying, Israel is important to God. I got to go defend it. Because that's what he was, the sword. Him and Jonathan picked that sword up early in the game. And they've been swinging it ever since. Because these battles, Jonathan was there. We'll see that later on as well. All right. So it said it came to be when Saul had returned pursuing the Philistines, that he got a report saying, David is in the wilderness. All right. And David was out there. So Saul took 3,000 men. Now, David has only got how many men with him? About 600. And most of them is probably like they may not be the cream of the crop, but David got some fighters with him. I think if Saul would have took them 3,000 men, they might have got their butt whooped, but we don't know. All right. He had 3,000 chosen men from Israel, and they went to seek David and his men in the rocks of the wild goat. And it came to be that they was in the sheepfold, and Saul decided, hey, I'm going to go relieve myself. Guys, I'm the king. I'm safe. We're good. So we'll break it here. So I keep going. It's just too much. We'll break it here, and then what we'll do is we'll pick back up at 24 at the beginning of it. Questions? Comments? Concerns? That might make me think I'm doing an actually okay job. Thank y'all so much for allowing me to talk about the Bible so much one time.